Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast, which is brought to you by the Timeline app. Timeline is a retirement income planning software that helps financial planners like me bring your retirement journey to life and answer your big retirement income questions. Now, this week, I am joined by Nick Sanderson of Audley Group. Over 20 years ago, Nick had a vision for the future of housing for later life. Now, I'm going to let him tell us all about that in a second, but and a whole of his story. But what Nick's speciality is luxurious retirement villages across the UK. Well, welcome to you, Nick.
Thank you, Justin. Morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Nick, so tell me, where did this idea come from for the Audley Group and for kind of, later life luxury living?
Oh, it all started a very long time ago, actually. Audley's 20 years old now, but actually it goes back, I'm afraid, even further to a business I set up in the 1980s. And it was, I grew up as the son of a house builder. My father was the founder of a big national house builder. And so I spent all my life as a child being dragged around development sites. So that's where I started my career. And then by chance, really, I was talking to my then sister's boyfriend, actually, who was just qualified as a doctor one evening. And we were talking about our ambitions to set up a business of our own. And it was a merging of what he saw as a really underprovided, poor quality provision for older people in housing and care as they got older, matched with my enthusiasm for housing, and we came together to let's see if we could create something that was better for older people, better than they'd previously been offered in the UK. That's how it started. Business called Beaumont, now part of a much bigger group, and then Audley was started, as I said, about 20 years ago.
So what did at the time when you were sat down maybe the coffee table one evening? What was
it was the pub? It was the pub, actually. Of course.
the best ideas, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were you kind of saying? What was the problem that you were trying to solve?
Well, this is way back when when care was very much institutionalized. The principle was you got older, as soon as you were unable to support yourself, the assumption was that the state would provide. You would become institutionalized. So way back, even before the mass development of care homes. So the options were you stayed in your own home for as long as possible until you had a crisis, and then you ended up in institutionalized care, long-stay geriatric wards, which, if you ever saw one, was not a place you or your family would ever want to be. So what we saw was a lot of people who were having to commit far too early to long-term institutional care when all they wanted to do was retain their independence. So it was a combination of saying, well, everybody wants to stay in a home of their own for as long as possible. So, but if their family home isn't really appropriate for them to stay in, what we need to do is provide specialist housing, but then also give them a range of services available that means that they can stay there for much longer than they might otherwise have been able to do. So with the support of care and a great environment and a lifestyle to suit, that means people can stay in place. That's what we set out to create way back in the dark days.
So luxurious retirement villages. I mean, I've had a look at your website. I mean, I've never visited one, but I mean, they look amazing.
Yeah, but
I'm tempted now. I mean, I hit 50 next year. I don't know whether I'm too young to go.
No, well, actually, I hate to say it, but the minimum age is 55 in some villages, so you are getting dangerously close.
I may need to put a deposit down.
Right, but it's that. I'm often saying to my colleagues, the day that we will know we've achieved something is when people stop being surprised. Because continually people come to our villages and a bit like you, having looked at our website, are amazed that there's this great high quality luxury offer out there. Because of course old people don't generally get given that sort of high quality choice in not just housing, but also in many consumer products. And that's what we're trying to address, actually, is to say to them, there is no reason why just because you're getting a bit older you shouldn't have something of really high quality.
No. And so, for people who maybe haven't seen the website, give a description for the radio show, obviously, of what people could expect if they were come to one of the orderly villages.
Well, it's three elements to every village: housing, lifestyle, and care if you need it. So the housing element first, you would see the chance for you to purchase a really high quality apartment or cottage. So just like a really good quality house builder provides. So typically a 2-bedroom apartment of around 1,000 square feet. So good, generous size. 2 bedrooms and a generous lounge, sitting room, kitchen, 2 bathrooms, just like your children would buy in London or anywhere else. Really well specified, great kitchens, and everything goes with it. Some outside space, whether a balcony or terrace or on the ground floor, and that's yours to purchase. But that is in the grounds of, or built around, a central club facility, what a better word, that I suppose I can best describe as being like a country house hotel. So within it is a restaurant, bar, or 2 restaurants actually, usually, bar, the spa, so swimming pool, steam room, sauna, treatment rooms, hairdressing, gym. Really important these days, as the young, old as they are now, are more aware of the benefits of exercise. And where there is a lifestyle offer that's just as much or as little as you want. You can wander in and read the papers, have a coffee, have lunch, go to an event, dinners, there's regular dinners, speakers come in, join a class, have your hair done, whatever you want. So it's a little, somebody described it to me recently, one of our villages, as being like Soho House for older people, for those who know Soho House, a sort of elitist clubs for younger people. And why not? Actually, why not? That's exactly how it should be.
And so, one of the things that a lot of guests have touched on recently is community as people get older. The lack of community. Kathy and I, my wife, the children popped in back down to our neighbours yesterday, and the 2 doors down, who are in their late 90s, and they're always very pleased to see us. And we had a cup of tea and what have you, and a great time. But they don't get a lot of visitors, and no. I do think that this community thing and this isolation is a big issue.
It's absolutely huge. I mean, loneliness is. People think we're dealing with issues around care and people's need to have extra care and support. I would say the biggest driver for people moving into our villages is isolation and loneliness. What is it we see statistically? Most people say their best friend is their television. They spend multiple hours. That's all they do. Engage. They see no one. They get less able. They communicate less. And I think that's a truism. Actually, we are, in our way, creating communities that replicate what communities used to be like. If you think communities were much more self-supportive, where your visit wouldn't have been infrequent in a village or the East End of London 100 years ago. Right. That's what communities and families did. They stayed together. They supported generations to generation. It still happens in certain countries around the world, India and China being 2 examples. But we've lost that. We've ripped the heart out of villages where people commute, or weekenders, where people travel off for work every morning. Shops have closed because of changed shopping patterns, and that means that the traditional community structure doesn't really exist as much, sadly, as it used to. And that's sort of what we replicate. I've just had a tour actually around all of our villages, or I'm finishing it this week, from Yorkshire to Devon to Kent. Wow. And you see them and you meet people, you talk to them, and they have a great time. They're living an active life, but they also know when they go back to their home, somebody's there to look out for them. Push a button, somebody's there to support them. But equally, it's not always just us. It's also their neighbours, the friends they've developed, who have become very supportive. And I was talking to a couple last week whose neighbour had just lost their partner. And that's very common, obviously, in our villages. And they were saying the support they've been able to give her to keep her supported and not isolated and lonely is such a fundamental part of what we do and what communities used to do.
Sure. And so, Nick, how many people, I mean, you've got different sized villages and you've got different things, which I'll come to in a second, but on average, how many people are in one of your villages?
Typical village these days is between 120, 150 for Audley, and that means typically 220 people.
Right.
Still a lot of single people live with us, but more and more couples actually. So it's a good number actually, because it's big enough that there's justification for a lot of activities to share, but not so big that you get lost,
No.
which I think is important. And it's a good balance. We do also have a more affordable version than an Audley, which is called Mayfield. They're bigger. They're 250 apartments.
Right.
So probably 400 people. But they tend to be in large centres of population where already, people already are, and that's where they live.
Right. Right. Okay. And so tell me how it works for the money,
Yeah.
So if I'm advising someone to sell up their home and come and live in one of your villages, how does it all work?
Well, it is exactly that. They are typically, our buyers are buying at something around 80% of what they're selling their property for. So they use it in part as an equity release scheme. So our typical buyer is selling the family house they've lived in for 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And will use 80% of the proceeds on average to buy a new apartment or cottage from us. So first and foremost, they're releasing equity to support themselves, often actually to distribute to children, to help them buy a house and various things. They buy a long leasehold interest, which is a different subject, but is protected in terms of the value in our view, but means if they spend £350,000 on an apartment, when they come to sell it, they'll get whatever that is worth in the market at the time. And our village is actually, unlike some retirement housing, are proven to track HPI over the last 20 years. So hopefully that means that their capital will at least be protected. What they do then is pay us a management charge, monthly management charge, which goes up, is fixed, doesn't vary, goes up only in line with inflation once a year. So there's no risk of them coming back and saying, sorry, we got the budget wrong. It's a fixed charge. They just know they're going to pay that plus inflation. They pay part of that deferred. So they pay a deferred management charge as well, which is they pay when they leave. That's based on the number of years they live with us. So it's actually 1% a year of the value when they leave for every year they live with us. Then on top of that, everything is bespoke. Whatever suits them. If they want more, they want to eat in the restaurant, or want to, particularly if they want to access our care teams. So we have a CQC regulated home care branch at each village, which can give them extra hours of care. If they want individual packages on top, then that's for us to agree with them on a separate basis. Right. So it means that within reason, if we can keep them, as we hope, there as long as possible, and they need support as they need it, they just have it on an escalating basis.
So that sounds fantastic. Now, how do people, there must be all types of different decisions people are thinking of or considering or what have you. What's your words of advice about, how they select the right place to come to, the area they are, the company? I appreciate you're going to be slightly biased towards the Audley Group.
Of course. Well, I'm actually chairman of our trade association, so I speak on behalf of all our members, so I couldn't possibly pick out Audley.
Sure. So just, if you were suggesting to your aunt who was kind of contemplating this decision, and many of our listeners who maybe didn't even know retirement villages existed, and were just thinking that they were faced going to a care home at some future day, what's your words of wisdom?
Well, as I say, actually, our trade association, which is called ARCO, Associated Retirement Community Operators, is a good reference point. They have a website, as of course do we, Audley, and all the members. So if you have access to that, that's a good place to look and just start to explore what's around. Typically, 3/4 of our customers come from within a 10-mile radius of our villages, so they tend to be local. So if they're somewhere near to them, that would be their preference. When choosing, make sure you're fully aware of all of the implications in terms of cost, as well as the positive things about what's available to support you as you get older. Ask about the level of care and support you can get to make sure it's likely to meet all of your needs as you get older, and that there's no risk that they can fall short somewhere and couldn't meet it. But then I would urge you to look really hard at the positive benefits in every sense, the positive benefits of early engagement, to make sure you're in a safe place early, with a lifestyle early enough to make you have the benefit of that lifestyle. Don't leave it too late. But also on the financial issues, look at the comparative cost. What we find is a lot of people underestimate the cost of their current lifestyle. So just the basic cost of supporting yourself in a 4-bed, 5-bed family home with a garden and all of those burdens that come with it, people tend to underestimate that and assume that sort of house price inflation will take care of it. But actually, people are always surprised when they look at the comparative cost of moving into somewhere because of the savings that can bring to you. But the biggest saving of all is if you make that choice early, protect yourself in a safe environment, let us look after you, the chances of you ending up with that horribly expensive end-of-life care in a care home may well distort that issue that's in the press, particularly around election time, of leaving it late, running the risk of having hugely expensive care bills at the end of your life. We think that if you make that choice early enough, there's a good chance we can keep you safe longer and actually have a better positive financial outcome, as well as great fun and a great place to live.
Fantastic. Well, that's been really has been fascinating, Nick, and thanks for all that. I think, especially for someone like myself who wasn't familiar with what you did, and I'm sure many listeners won't be either. So, to find out more about Audley Group Retirement Villages, you can check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where we'll put all the links to the trade association, to Nick's company, etc., and any information that we think would be useful to you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave a review on iTunes by searching for the Retirement Cafe podcast, or subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. To get in touch, either email me at hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk. You can connect on our Facebook page, The Retirement Cafe, or you can get me on Twitter at Justin King CFB. I always love to hear your thoughts about our guests and ideas for who you would like to hear from on the podcast. Thank you once again to the Timeline app for sponsoring the podcast. And until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.